Welcome to the West Wing Week, your guide to everything that's happening at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This week, the President continued to fight for the proposals in the American Jobs Act to put folks back to work and grow the economy. The President welcomed the 1985 Chicago Bears and the Tunisian Prime Minister to the White House, traveled to Pittsburgh to convene a meeting of his Jobs Council, attended the Forum on American Latino Heritage, and hosted the President of South Korea for a state visit. That's October 7th to the 13th, or We Go Together.
We go together.
On Friday, the President kicked off our West Wing Week by celebrating the 1985 Super Bowl champion Chicago Bears.
This is in the Oval Office somewhere. Welcome to the White House for this well-deserved and long overdue recognition. Stick around, guys, and enjoy yourselves, but as I mentioned back there, don't break anything and keep your eyes on McMahon.
Later, the Tunisian Prime Minister arrived for an official visit and bilateral meeting with the President in the Oval Office. He's the first leader swept into office by the Arab Spring to meet with President Obama at the White House.
Was the first country in the North African Middle East region to begin this incredible transformation that we now call the Arab Spring.
As journalists were leaving the Oval Office, the President answered a question about the three winners of the Nobel Peace Prize.
The three women who won the Nobel Prize today are all remarkable examples of not only their own determination and spirit, but also a reminder that when we empower women around the world, then everyone is better off.
On Tuesday, the President made a trip to 55 Hot Metal Street in Pittsburgh, the home of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers training facility, where he met with electrical apprentices training to improve their job skills and increase their competitiveness through technical education. He then convened a meeting of his Council on Jobs and Competitiveness, composed of business executives and labor leaders who have been tasked by the President to come up with ideas for strengthening our economy and creating jobs.
The Council here is quoted as saying, if there is one thing that Washington should be able to agree on, rebuilding our infrastructure should be one. I mean, when you've got the AFL and the Chamber of Commerce agreeing on anything, that's a sign that it's a good idea.
The President then spoke about the urgency of passing the American Jobs Act so we can immediately put workers back on the job and put more money in the pockets of working Americans.
Today, my Job Council laid out new actions we can take together, the private sector and government, to help unleash a new era of entrepreneurship in America that will grow the economy and create jobs and strengthen our ability to compete with the rest of the world.
Back at the White House, the First Lady was serving as first jumper by leading a challenge to break the record for the most people doing jumping jacks in a 24-hour period as part of her Let's Move initiative. But first, the kids warmed up with some comedy.
It's like,
At the end of the day, the President enjoyed a beer at an Irish pub in Central Florida with a group of unemployed pipe fitters and plumbers who are exactly the kinds of workers who would benefit from the American Jobs Act and get back to work rebuilding our nation's infrastructure. On Wednesday, the President addressed a crowd of student, business, civic, and cultural leaders at the Forum on American Latino Heritage, stressing the need to pass initiatives proposed in his American Jobs Act.
Last night, even though a majority of senators voted in favor of the American Jobs Act, a Republican minority got together as a group and blocked this jobs bill from passing the Senate. They said no to more jobs for teachers, no to more jobs for cops and firefighters, no to more jobs for construction workers and veterans, no to tax cuts for small business owners and middle-class Americans. Now, a lot of folks in Washington and the media will look at last night's vote and say, well, that's it. Let's move on to the next fight. But I've got news for them. Not this time. Not with so many Americans out of work. Not with so many folks in your communities hurting. We will not take no for an answer.
On Thursday, October 13th, a crowd gathered on the south lawn of the White House to welcome President Lee of the Republic of Korea and his wife to the White House.
President Lee, our two nations have stood together for more than 60 years. Over the past 2 years, we've deepened our cooperation. And with our landmark trade agreement, we will bring our nations even closer, creating new jobs for both our people and preserving our edge as two of the most dynamic economies in the world.
During the day, President Obama and President Lee held bilateral meetings and a news conference to discuss a range of issues, including our dynamic economic relationship and how to capitalize on our relationship to create jobs.
We agreed to move ahead quickly with the landmark trade agreement that Congress passed last night, and which I'll sign in the coming days. It's a win for both our countries. As a former executive, President Lee will understand when I say that just as Americans buy Hyundais and Kias, I hope that South Koreans will buy more Fords, Chryslers, and Chevys.
That evening, the President and First Lady hosted the first couple of South Korea at an official state dinner in the East Room of the White House. To find out more information on any of these topics or to see complete videos of these events, go to whitehouse.gov. And thanks again for checking out your West Wing Week.
I'm tempted to wear it.